So I just got back from work, and actually I got up early because my boss left at around like 2:30. So because she had to take her nephew to a driving lesson or something, and so whenever she leaves, we're like, all right, well, she's the most important person here, so if she's not here and we have questions, it's just kind of whatever, so we just leave. Yes, and plus I didn't really have anything to do. I don't think I did very much. And then so I came home, and one of the things I remember I wanted to kind of talk about is like how like the mentality of like older age, because one of the things I've been worried about lately is like my weight. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that there's this little, like, what's this little piece of fat that's like right there, you know, like where'd that come from? Sometimes I can be very paranoid about my body, because like when I was in college, I basically had like close to a six-pack because I was active all the time, and I'm still active. I feel like I'm more active now more than ever because of my age. Like I've aged since like, you know, my early 20s. I'm on the other side, so obviously I feel like there's this sense of, you know, your body's going to change. It's not going to be the same way it was when you're like 18 years old. You know, it's going to change, especially metabolism. And one thing I kind of question is like how, because like, for example, like on my dad's side of the family, most of the people live to be like 90 something years old. Like my great grandmother was 94, she was almost 95 when she passed. And I know my mom was like, I don't want to live till like I'm like 90 something, because all my friends are going to be dead, and you know, my back's going to be hurting, and I'm going to have all these ailments, and I won't be able to do anything. And I feel like that's not necessarily true, because I know that like in older age, and I don't know what it is about our obsession with like old age, because we feel like, oh, like you turn 30, oh my gosh, I'm 30, like I'm good, I'm old. And I feel like, you know, I actually look forward to my 30s, because I feel like by then, as an adult, I will probably know a little bit more about what I'm doing in my life, more so than, you know, in my early 20s, where I was just struggling to just figure out how to survive. I mean, I'll admit, 2019 was the worst year of my life, because that was like a rude awakening. Like, congratulations, you finished college, welcome to the real world. And it was really awful. I remember couch surfing, trying to figure out how to find a job in the process, and finding my own place. And I'm going to be honest with you, like, retrospect, I'm kind of glad I got through it, because I learned a little bit more about how to kind of manage everything, because it's like you're like a fish out of water. And some people have a better transition outside of, you know, after graduating from college. Other people don't, like me. You know, it takes forever to get a job, and then on top of that, you're trying to, you know, you're surviving off of credit cards that, you know, and apparently I found out that a lot of credit card companies do, they mostly market themselves towards younger people, like college graduates, like they can be connected to universities, so that's why they push credit cards on people who are very irresponsible, and most likely they can charge them like late fees and interest, because because they don't understand how this works. Like credit card companies, they don't want like people like me who like pay their bills on time, and they pay it in full, because they don't get interest if you paid in full. You know, so they're making their most money off of people who are irresponsible. So don't be like me. You know, I'm trying to teach my younger brother the same thing, because he's just graduated from college in May, and so I'm kind of trying to. I think like when you're the oldest, you're kind of like the trial run. And then you know, for him, it's like he's kind of like learning from my mistakes more than anything else. And I want to be honest with you, birth order matters. But, you know, I feel like when we look at like the quality of life, I feel like, you know, especially when people are trying to make themselves feel like look younger, and, you know, I feel like aging is a privilege, because there's a lot of times, you know, like people may not make it as far, like, I mean, I'm 26, I'm not really ashamed of that. I'm 26 years old. And, you know, I honestly feel like I have better years ahead, because when you're younger, it's like, first of all, you don't have as much life experience. And sometimes things can be just miserable, you know, like I said, just trying to find a place to live, and trying to find employment, you know, especially also because I'm also an entrepreneur, you know, trying to find a way to balance my job, and then also being able to still find ways to make my businesses profitable, so I don't need the job anymore, you know, more or less. And so when I think about that, I feel like, like I said, I'm looking forward to 30s because, like I said, I'll probably have more sense of what I'm doing. You're still technically, I mean, you're really still a young adult because, like, I don't know. I mean, like, for me, like, it's funny, like, when I meet someone who looks like they're in their 30s, I'm like, they look like they could be in their 20s, but then they're like, the way they dress and the way they carry themselves seems a little bit more mature. So I'm like, yeah, you still look young, but you're still, you're older and you're wiser. Like, I know a lot of times people are looking forward to retirement, that kind of thing. But then at the same time, they're like, oh, but when I'm older, I remember someone in high school was talking about how, like, yeah, I don't know if I want to live past 50 because after that you're going to be like, my back hurts. And and I realized that how you take care of yourself now really matters more than just like the aging process. Like, the aging process is going to be what it is. Like, the way that I look right now is going to be completely different in the next 10 to 20 years, and that's just a fact. And I feel like sometimes sometimes a lot of people deny that, or sometimes people can take advantage not take advantage, take their youth for granted. And I think that it's like, oh, I'm young, so I can do it, And I remember when I was living at this co-living space, this is where my first apartment out of college. And I remember we had a housemate, and I remember, and God rest his soul, I love him. He was great. He was like everybody's big brother. And I remember we were really concerned because on his Instagram, he would post a lot of pictures of him walking along the edge of like these high buildings, like these like high-rise buildings. And, and he was a Gemini, and he's like, yeah, I love, heights. And I remember all of us being like, hey, you should not do that. You're scaring us. And then there was an incident that happened where he actually fell off a building, and it was just devastating because, like I said, we really loved him. He was a really big part of our family. And I think the one thing I've learned from that is, yes, you can be young and you might feel like, yeah, I can do all these things and whatever, and nothing's gonna happen. Especially like, when you think about like people who go out and they party and then they get drunk and then they're like, oh yeah, I can definitely drive, like it's fine, and they're having a great time. But I feel like we have to make sure that we're not taking our youth for granted. Like even for me, I feel like with our 20s, this is the best time to build something. This is the best time to, really, this is the best time to really, to do something significant, because you have the most energy you'll ever have to do something. You have a college education. If you're not furthering your education at that point, you're really being able to get a full sense of, building something. Like, hey, I'm going to build a business, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go out and whatever. But I feel like sometimes we sit, like I said, we want to make sure we're putting our energy into things that matter, not so much as like, I'm not going to say that like, you need to stop going out on the weekends and partying. I feel like when you do it often to where it feels like you need that to cope with work. My thing is if you don't like your job and it makes you feel like, oh, I'm going to go out on Friday and Saturday night and I'm going to like party like it's 1999 every single weekend, I feel like we need to really, in introspection, look at, okay, why do I feel like I have to do that? What's wrong with my life at this point, and changing it. I feel like sometimes we feel like everything is fixed, like fixed mindsets, like, oh my gosh, like I can't change my circumstance. I need my job right now. I'm like, what's to stop you from going and finding other jobs? For me, like even right now, I love my job right now. I'm very happy with it. And my boss knows that, like my plan is probably to stay maybe half of her term, because I really strongly want to go to Europe and I want to get my master's. So because this job pays pretty well and my boss is fantastic, it's very rare to get a very good boss who stocks up the kitchen with snacks that you like, and is very like patient and very, I wouldn't say tolerant. I was going to say tolerant, but I was like, that's not the right word. Like very patient with you, especially because everyone in her office, out of all three of us, or out of all two of us, both of us that are her staff members, we're both the same age. We're both 26. So like when you have young people, you realize that they're maybe inexperienced, or maybe just coming out of law school, or in my case, I'm coming from another industry because I'm I'm just a secretary. Well, I mean, I'm not just a secretary. She says I'm important. So if she says it, then I guess it's true. But, in that case, when you have younger people who are inexperienced, they need patience. You have to adapt differently when when there is, younger people. Also, I will just say that what's really important is also making sure that, if you're going to, in this case, it's like just knowing when you need to move on. I feel like sometimes, I notice, there are people who will stay in the same position. I remember I was at a job when someone said, yeah, I've been here for X amount of years, I don't do anything else. And I remember talking about how, I want to, I have a business and I really want to get to the point where I can have the possibility to retire earlier, to do something, or to do something that I want to do. And she said, oh yeah, retirement early sounds good, but you need to find something so you're keeping busy. And I'm like, I don't want to be busy. Sometimes I just want to do whatever I want, my main thing is traveling, is building immersion programs, to get my, after getting my master's, I want to get a doctorate or a PhD. I haven't decided yet. It depends on what program that I find that's really in my arena. And, those kinds of things, and having those goals. And sometimes when it seems like when you're getting older and it feels like, when you're getting older and you notice that a lot of people are kind of moving forward, and you're kind of sometimes they're oh yeah, everyone has they have goals, they have things that they want to work toward. And when you don't have those, or when you're not really sure what your goals are, sometimes it can put you in a position where, you're just, I would say complacent. And that's one of the places that's very dangerous. And if you don't know what complacency is, because I really didn't know I've heard the word in the context, but what I think of it really means is just you're in the same place, but you're not making any progress, you're not growing. And one thing for me that I feel I would never want is, for me, this is the idea of a nightmare, is when your boss is younger than you. Could you imagine having more life experience than someone and they're telling you what to do? And so I feel that's kind of a point where I feel that's when we need to move on. We need to find things that, and I think if you're in that position, I'm, not trying to tell you what to do, or, this is just how I feel. And, you can obviously, in this dinner table conversation, you can always put in the chat what your opinion is, and I'd love to listen to that and how you feel about it, because again, this is a discussion. This is something to open up discussion. But I honestly feel when it comes to age, like I said, when you're aging, you're getting better, you're wiser, you have more experience. Most of the times people, when they're older, depending on the path you go to, they have more money, you have more security, whether it be financially, whether it be in relationships, whatnot. And so, and I honestly feel I wouldn't want to be in the same boat. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I thought I was living my best life. Being in college, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But really, I honestly, when I think about it, in my late 20s, I would not want to go back to my early 20s, because honestly, I had, I want to build my career. I want to see what it looks like. I want to get married. I want to have children. I don't want to stay in my 20s. I don't want to kind of reminisce about the past. Of course, I want to talk about the past, because, I feel there's a lot to learn from it, but I really want to look forward. I really love talking about all the things I really want to do, especially with my organization. With M&P, I really love where I feel that's going to go, especially because we're launching a really exciting project next spring. I'm so excited about it, and I think it's going to help a lot of people when it comes to international and foreign language education. All these things I'm going to do, and then when you get into your old age, when you can actually hand things off to younger people, and I feel sometimes in a lot of circumstances. And I sometimes see it mainly in politics. Like I said, I'm not trying to go down that path, but I'm just going to say that's one place, for example, that I see it is where people are just afraid to hand things off to a younger generation. I think some of it is they think that oh, they're going to ruin everything. And I honestly feel young people do have good ideas. We have new ways of doing it. We have more energy. But I feel when you kind of get to a point where you're by the time I'm in my 70s and my 80s, I don't want to be running. I want to call it quits. I want to say, hey, I did my piece. You young man, young woman, you can handle it. And part of the process is training up your children and your next generation to do these things well. I mean, when you're older, like I said, you have so much knowledge to give. And so when we look at younger people, it's like we shouldn't look at it as like, oh, young people. Like, one of the things I hate so much is like when people are like, oh, young people are always on their phone, like they never do this and they're so lazy and they're always doing this and all they care about is this. And it's like, actually, no, if you actually talk to us, and because even like when I met my boss, I met her at a fundraising event that I was helping my mom with, and I was taking donations. And all of a sudden she just sits down and she's like, because my boss, she loves young people, her passions with children and young adults and whatnot. And so she sat down next to me and said, I want to know about you. Like, I know your mom and, like whatever and what she's doing. And I want to know about you. Like, what are you doing? And, I want to hear about your goals. And of course, we had this conversation and I told her what I was doing. And she just was like, I just love young people with ambition. And she's just so excited just to hear about it. And she gave me some suggestions on people to connect with. She got me connected to she urged me to get connected to a literacy center, which actually they offer language courses. And also got me to connect to them, which I'm a volunteer to tutor. I'm assigned to a high school student. I help him with his homework and things like that. And I also got connected to the executive director, who also has decided, she's like, I set up a meeting with her and she's like, how can I support and whatnot. Turns out she's actually in the same sorority as my aunts. Like you really never know. And I feel like when we spend time with young people, we can understand where their values and what their things are. I mean, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I mean, like right now, I'm actually not on social media as much. I'm more active on YouTube because it's just easier for me it's easier to do these kinds of videos than constantly having to put out content. We're a very social media driven generation now. And so I'm not on social media as often as I'd like to be because it takes a lot of energy, and sometimes when I'm on there, I'm just mindlessly scrolling. And it got to the point where, especially like around the time of the pandemic, I was like, I'm so bored with social media. I mean, it's important, I guess, because that's a really great way to spread the word. But at the same time, I feel like, like I don't have time to spend like an hour just scrolling. I have a business to run. I got projects I have to work on, meetings I have to deal with. And now, of course, I have a new job as of January. So, I do need to focus on that. But all in all, I feel like, like the whole point is you need to get to know that younger generation. And like I said, see where their values are at, where they can be. And then finding ways to kind of get them, like, I love adults who are like, hey, do you want to come in and who, like, hey, do you want to come in and like see how I run this office or something like that? Or, I know you're interested in this, and so I know someone, so-and-so who is, I don't know, like who works in this particular field. Maybe they can get you to do like an internship, or maybe they might be able to find you a job since you're a new graduate or something like that. Really taking time to make interest because I feel like for me, obviously I know we're not going to live forever, and I feel like that is an inevitable fact. If you were born on this earth, you are going to die. You are not going to live forever. So when you think about it, it's like when I'm, because some people, and I know like for me, like I said, I am more on a biblical perspective than anything else. I know sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm not going to live forever, so I might just get whatever I can. But my perspective is that I want to leave in peace, knowing that, the world is not going to fall apart, My biggest thing is I know my parents aren't going to live forever, which is kind of one of the reasons why as I've gotten older, I've been really trying to do more things with my parents, and especially since I don't live with them anymore, trying to make sure that, I'm still spending time with them. Because my dad just, he reached the milestone of 60, and I realized, of course, 60 is not old. I don't think so. But, every year when he gets, when both my parents have a new birthday, it's like, okay, it's another year and they're getting older, and it's not like a sad thing like, oh, they're gonna die, it's like I said, it's inevitable. But I feel like and as Robert Greene says in his book The Laws of Human Nature, because it's the 10th law in his book where he talks about like the denial of death, we realize that if there's no end to things, we won't appreciate them as much as we do, as we would if they were not going to end. You know, it's like when I do, like, I think like when I spend time with my dad, I realize that he's not going to be around forever. So it's not about like being sad. It's about making the best out of what you have right now and being present. You know, because he's not going to be, if he was here forever, I would probably be like, oh, you know, I don't have to spend as much time. I can spend time with him whenever, because, you know, he'll always be here. And I recognize that that's not the case. You know, for me, my thing is when my dad and, you know, my mom, when they pass away, I want to make sure that by the time they are on their deathbed, I want to make sure that they feel confident that they can leave the world knowing I'm going to be okay, that I'm financially stable, that, you know, let's say I have my own family, you know, because I do want them to be able to see their own grandchildren before they pass on, you know, those kinds of things. And, you know, my thing is that's my perspective, is I just want to make sure nothing's going to fall apart, that my lineage is okay. Because the other part is that my family, like, we do have a legacy. That's something that's important to us, you know. And so, like, we want to make sure that the next generation is going to carry the same level of excellence. I mean, especially like with my family, education is so important. Diversity is really important. Black excellence is so important. So, like, you know, if you're going to do something, do it well, you know, those kinds of things. So, and I think that when we look at our perspectives on aging, I think that we realize our best years are ahead. You know, like, I would not want to be in my 20s forever. I mean, I love being youthful. I love being able to have energy to ride my bike every day. I love having energy to be able to, you know, to do all these things that I'm doing, you know, work on these projects. The only thing is I can't pull all-nighters like I used to in high school. I can't do that anymore. Yeah, I need my rest. But at the end of the day is that I know that, you know, as I get older, you know, I have more years ahead of me. You know, those are the more successful years. You know, I want to be able to see what my years of fruitfulness, you know, like, you know, how I'm able to flourish. You know, how I'm able to be fruitful and multiply, as it says in the Bible. So, I really want to know what your comment, like in the comments. I really want to know what your opinion is about aging. Like, do you feel like there's a lot of pressures to look young, or to look a certain way? I really want to know about that. And I know, like, sometimes, like, especially, and this is going to be my last point, but, you know, like when we look at like industries like cosmetic surgery, you know, where people are trying to look younger, and I feel like for the most part, like, especially like one thing that really bothers me is, like, you know, like makeup, especially because a lot of people I feel like sometimes younger people are trying to look older, and then older people are trying to look younger, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why don't everybody just be their own age, you know? And take good care of yourself, because the habits you have when you're young is gonna be really crucial when you're older. You know, I was thinking about like how a few years ago, actually when that Down to Earth with Zac Efron came out, and I remember I had roommates that watched it, and there was a point where they actually went to Sardinia to visit this like village or this city or something, and apparently it was like a city that was known for like people who lived to like 90 something. There were like a lot of centennials, like people living like past 100, and they were just like, they had like, one of them did like an eye exam, and she was just, it was like passed it with flying colors. Or one guy, he was like 100 something years old, and he walks to the same bar every morning. He walks to get his drink and walks all the way back home. You know, it's like, when we think about, oh, when we're going to be old, we're not going to be able to do things, I feel like you technically can. There's proof that people have been older and there's like, I know like there's one person, when I was in high school, I used to do these workouts called like classical stretch, and it was with Miranda Esmond White. And they were just like workout videos. It was play on PBS at like 5 in the morning or something. And I would go downstairs and I would turn on our cable, and I would watch it when it aired. And yeah, and I love those videos. And she was like 60 years old, and she's doing all these like things. And she used to be a ballet dancer in like some Canadian company. And I'm like, there are people who are like in their 60s, 70s, 80s who can still do some things that people can do in their 40s, you know. So I mean, I feel like we kind of put so much emphasis on trying to look younger, or like age is bad, and age is really good. Like I said, it's a privilege. Who wants to live to be 26 years old and then die? You know, it's like there's so much promise there. You know, you want to live a full life. So yeah, so thanks so much for watching and for listening to me ramble about these topics. Like I said, this is just mainly just to open up discussions, and yeah, so please you know, write me something in the comments, and yeah, I'd love to hear it. All right, bye guys.